Just like a lot of you, I am also kind of getting used to Zoom. So my school uses a different platform, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But for tonight, I would like us to go over virtual learning versus distance learning, as well as hopefully I can give you some encouraging words. I'd like to go over just kind of how to set up and conduct a virtual IEP. And then we'll take a look at virtual classroom basics. And then I would like to show you a sample virtual lesson. All right, so just a few things before we get started. I would like to acknowledge, like I just mentioned a second ago, that distance learning is going to inherently be different from our virtual or online teaching. One of the biggest differences, obviously, is that when families sign their student up for virtual or online teaching, that's a choice that that family is making for their child. Versus now, none of us have this choice where we are thrown into distance learning. So, personally, even though I teach online, my own children, they go to a brick and mortar school. So that is an actual physical location where they go to school. So you'll hear me say brick and mortar throughout the presentation. That's what that means. And so obviously, our brick and mortar schools, they're trying to acclimate to this whole new distance learning. How does that roll out? How do we make sure that there aren't going to be any equity issues or disparities in access? And, right now, while everybody is trying to figure that out, honestly, I think that there will be some disparities in access to learning while our brick and mortar does acclimate because in the virtual online school, our families, since they did sign up for this, and because our school is set up for virtual teaching, everyone has access to a computer, to the internet, to all of the resources that they need. While, with distance learning, we're still trying to figure out if our students don't have access to this online learning model, how else can we supplement their instruction and how can we make it fair for everyone? So I do just want to say that some of the things that I will be showing you tonight, may not translate as easily into the distance learning model. But again, we're teachers, we're creative, and we can just try to go with the flow. All right, and again, the different online platforms provide different options. So like I said, with the school that I teach for, we use Blackboard Collaborate. Which just has some different options, but I do know that most school districts right now are probably using Zoom, so I'm going to try to show you some lessons through Zoom, even though I'm not super familiar, so you'll probably see me mess up. All right, so I would like, here if I can get my little spotlight back. So with Zoom, you have to hover, first of all, to get your tools and everything. So, all right, encouraging words. So I put up here first for everybody. If I can do it, you can do it too. So I am not tech savvy by any means. I probably, when I decided to make that transition from the brick and mortar setting to the online virtual setting, I probably cried for the first 6 weeks, if I'm honest with you. But, things started to click. So I just want to encourage you that, you may be frustrated in the beginning of trying to transition to an online model, and that's just the way that it is. But you have your brick and mortar experience, you know how to run a classroom, and so much of that can be utilized in the online setting. So I just want you to remember that as teachers, you're learning a new way to teach, and also that our students are going to be learning a new way to learn. So that we have to be patient with each other. We're all going to make mistakes, and that's okay. No one is perfect. And just have patience with yourself. Go easy on yourself and recognize any and all moments of progress. All right, so when we take a look, I'm going to kind of jump now into the nuts and bolts of being a special education teacher. So a huge part of our job is the IEP process and holding IEP meetings. So some of this information you may already be familiar with, but for some of you, I just want to kind of put this out for you. There are some free resources that you can use. So first, in scheduling your virtual IEPs, I just want to let you know of Doodle Poll. You may be familiar with that. You can get a free account with Doodle. And what's really nice is you can put all of the IEP participants on your Doodle Poll and then send out a bunch of options as far as dates and everything for your IEP meeting. Now, I usually don't include parents on my Doodle Poll just because they don't need to see all of the back and forth in terms of scheduling. But once I have like 3 or 4 dates that I can offer parent, then I might put that into an email or a phone call to them to try to nail down a date. Again, just a reminder, we're never going to put the first name of this student anywhere. So that's for confidentiality laws. We're going to make sure, you know, on Doodle Poll and emails, any of that, that we do not put the student's first name. And so right here, this is kind of like at the very end, if you set up a Doodle Poll, what it would look like for your participants. Now, once say that you have already scheduled your IEP, you can also just, if you use SACE, and I think also with Cyrus, you can always, I just want to let you know that you can save these as PDFs and you can password protect your documents. So anything that needs to go out with an IEP, your notice of meeting, you can always password protect those. Oftentimes, you know, if your school has like a monthly password, you can use that, or maybe you could just put the clue out there, hey, it's the student's first name, something like that, but you're never going to put the student's name like in the email itself. Now, DocuSign is ideal, but I know a lot of schools don't actually have that. So this is just another way that you can get IEP documents out to parents, out to all of the other participants. And then, of course, you can do your traditional mail. All right. Now, in terms of also scheduling the virtual IEP, if you have, I'm going to skip down to the slide. So if you have access to a virtual platform, it's paid for and secure, I think right now is what we're going with, you can hold your IEP in that virtual platform. So Zoom is really nice, you know, to schedule the virtual IEP, as well as Blackboard Collaborate. Oops, see, I knew I was going to do that. I clicked, and now if I go back, you're going to see all of my slides. All right, you can also use the teleconference call-in number. So we didn't miss any information though with me skipping ahead, it's okay.
And I'll just add, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Erin, I'll just add that you want to use the paid version of Zoom. So the Zoom healthcare account, it's about $200 a month. Your district should be paying for it. It's HIPAA compliant also for counseling and for speech language services. So you really want to use compliant software for that. And Blackboard is also secure. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so so long as it's paid, you can hold your IEPs in these platforms. With Zoom, it's really nice, just like how I'm doing tonight for this webinar. You can just screen share your slides, or you could just screen share right there if you use SACE or if you use Cyrus, and then all participants that have logged in and are viewing it can just see in real time those documents. If you need to make any changes, you can just do it right then and there and everyone can see it. With Blackboard Collaborate, what you have to do first is save your IEP as a PDF, and then you can convert it to a PowerPoint. You would upload it into Blackboard. The thing with Blackboard too, just kind of like Zoom, maybe your parents aren't going to have access to this, or maybe your related services aren't going to have access to one of these platforms. So I just wanted to also show that there are teleconference call-in options as well. This one, I don't know if you caught it on the previous slide, but this is the freeconference.com. And you can, if you're the moderator, you can ID the participants before they come in. You can also have control and like kick them out if, say, something gets kind of crazy during your IEP. So you can always do teleconference calls as well, and just kind of review the IEP that way. And then what you would have to do is send it out. So here's what happens. Say if you held your IEP in a virtual platform, and then your parent agrees to like all parts of the IEP, All of the participants, if you're doing it in Zoom or Blackboard, they can sign that IEP signature page virtually by using those whiteboard tools. So that's really nice because you can get, if everybody is viewing it and is logged in to, say, Zoom, you can just get everybody to sign right then and there. That counts. And then what you do is you will either take a screenshot of that signature page, you can snip it and save it. And then I know for sure with SACE, because that's the system that I'm most familiar with, you can actually upload that documentation as consent. Now, sometimes though, some of the participants, maybe they called into Zoom or your teleconference and they're just listening. So what you can do there is you can indicate on your signature page, ask the parents if they felt like they were involved in the process. You can click that for them. And then you would just have to ask the other participants so there's a couple different ways. You can ask them if the participants are in agreement for you to sign on their behalf. Or if you can't do that, then again, you save your IEP documents as a PDF. You could password protect it, and then you could send it out to the parent for signature as well as all the other participants. Or DocuSign is wonderful if your district has that, just because they can send it out to everybody and get consent. And then, of course, traditional mail for signature. And then again, once you get everything, you'll just scan and upload it into SAFE. All right, and then kind of the big question, how do we obtain data for our virtual IEPs? So how do we continue to collect data during our distance online learning? So I'm going to be showing you kind of a sample lesson, and then I can show you, different ways that you can collect data on students. But of course, if you're doing Zoom or if you're doing Blackboard and students are working directly on the screen with their whiteboard tools, you can always either take a screenshot or snip their work when possible. And then of course, you're going to want to make sure that the work is independently completed, or if they have a parent or a caregiver they're helping or assisting them, you'd want to make a note with how much prompting was required. And you can communicate with the parent or caregiver on how much prompting was given. You can also use any diagnostic assessments that you have. So, our school used STAR 360. In previous years, we used iReady. And so you can take that information as well and use that for skills that our students have mastered, as well as skills that the students are ready to work on. And these are really good, for the academic present levels, as well as baselines on goals. And then a huge part of virtual special education, and probably now with distance learning as well, is you're going to want to ask for a lot of parent input in each of those sections of your present levels of performance. So of course, like the academics, you can get some input from them, but really to, look at the communication, look at vocational development, you would look at social, emotional, daily living skills, and get your parent input. And then in your IEP, you just say per parent report in each of those sections, and that'll help complete your IEP, especially now. In your IEP, you can indicate that, due to distance learning, per parent report, parent says X, Y, and Z. And that makes it really clear too that the setting is no longer at brick and mortar, but is during our distance learning time. And then, of course, always user-related services input as well. All right, so that was just a really quick overview on virtual IEPs. And so I'm sure we probably have some questions. I'm going to look.
Yeah, and I just want to preface, a few people came in late. So we thought it'd be a good idea to talk a little bit about virtual IEPs before we got into providing services for students in the moderate to severe program, because we've gotten so many questions about this.
Okay. So did you see any that kind of came up?
Yeah, so how would you, and I'm glad you brought up the functional skills, because I think that's important at home. Parents can help with that. How would you be able to, Keely asks, how would you be able to do standardized assessment for initial or triennial IEPs? And I know I can answer that. I don't know if you want to, if not, I can.
So you can, because I know, like with our school, we're still kind of working that out as well. So if you want to take that.
Yeah, so the federal government has given guidance on this, and they're saying that if you're not able to do a full assessment in person, that you can put off your IEP. So, of course, this means then that triennials and initial IEPs would the testing portion would have to be put off until people are allowed to be face-to-face. And I know that many advocate groups also want that type of testing to be face-to-face. So then the question becomes, what about our workload in the fall when we all return and then we have 20 initials? So that's something your union needs to bargain in an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding to address that. But I think for annuals, you most certainly can do everything that Erin's suggesting. I think observation is very appropriate for annuals. So, okay.
So Karen, then this is Erin. I do have a question.
Yeah.
So would like a review of records or a default review of records be a placeholder, or can you just bump those triennials out?
Oh, that's a good idea. You know what? I actually don't know. We have not gotten that question. So I think in this situation, the government and the state are being flexible. So I guess it just depends on the situation. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay.
Sorry. No, we're not saying you cannot do a triennial. We're just saying in some instances you may not be able to. Also, some initials, people may not use assessments. They might use other methods, depending if you have like an MTSS model or something like that. So it's really hard to make a general statement about that piece. But if you are requiring testing that requires face-to-face, then there is flexibility from the state and the federal government to put that off until school resumes. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the instructional piece.
All right. Okay, so for our virtual classroom basics, again, a lot of this is going to be very similar to your brick and mortar setting. So really, you don't want to reinvent the wheel here. In the virtual setting, if you're going to be doing online learning, always have a predictable schedule and routine for your students. Have clear expectations and rules. Those are something that you can set up with your students maybe during a session, or it's just something that you kind of go over with your students once they log into one of their first sessions. And I can show you an example of an expectation slide in just a moment. Again, just like brick and mortar, you're always going to give your students consistent positive feedback and reinforcement. A lot of it's going to be verbal, but you have also a little annotate in Zoom, and you can, give little green check marks, or you can give a thumbs up in the chat or a little smiley face. So just different ways to reinforce the students. Try to have a distraction-free setting. I put in parentheses as much as possible because a lot of us might also have our own children at home or our spouses at home or parents. And then also your slides should be distraction-free. So pretty much everything that I put on my slides is just what I want my students to focus on. There are a few slides where I get a little cutesy with them, but those are more just for like transition. It's not really learning slides or anything like that. And just like in brick and mortar, you want to make sure that you have movement breaks put into your schedule. That's really important, especially for students that aren't used to sitting in front of a computer for extended amount of time. You also don't want them to hurt their eyes or their necks. So, having them get up and move around is best. Also have your transitional warnings. So in Zoom and in Blackboard, you can use timers or clocks. You can also prompt your students verbally, or you can have little slides that kind of prompt them to let them know what the next activity is going to be. And then provide as many choices as possible. So this would be like when you're teaching a lesson, and I'll show you in just a moment here when we look at those slides. maybe the students, they can use the microphone, or they could use the whiteboard, they could pick the chat or just the polling option, just different choices throughout the lesson on ways that they want to engage with it. And then down here, of course, always be professional. So, I know that we're always professional in the classroom, and the same goes in the virtual setting as well. You're not only going to have your students, but probably also parents or a caregiver there as well. So be professional. All right, so I'm creating the virtual classroom experience. Now we're going to kind of get into all of the components of a virtual classroom. I have a disclaimer up here though, so before I tell you about my virtual classroom model that we do at California Virtual Academies, I just want you to know that you need to work with your district or school on the expected hours of live instruction. And I know that that's been kind of a huge question for a lot of special education teachers, because if we have students that are with us the entire day, we're kind of wondering, how do we provide, let's say, those 6 or 7 hours a day of instruction? How do we translate to the online experience? So you will have to work with your district on those expected hours of instruction. And maybe it can be a combination. So for my classroom model, what we do for our students that require, they're considered higher minutes of specialized academic instruction. So we provide 2 hours of live instruction daily for our students. And then we also provide approximately 2 hours of independent work. And over here it says with their learning coach each day as well. So with California Virtual Academies, we have, parents have agreed, they've basically signed a contract saying that there's going to be a learning coach. A lot of times that is a parent or a caregiver that is with our students during that time of instruction. So again, like I said, there will be some disparities because, we can't guarantee with the distance learning model that this is going to occur. So the virtual platform is set up for that, the online school, but again, distance learning, that's going to be where there's a discrepancy. I know personally, because I'm still teaching every day and working, my kids, they went to brick and mortar, now they're doing a combination of online school and packet work, and I'm not really with them because I'm also working, and so is my husband. So I don't think that we can really expect our parents to 100% be there with our students. But this is what we provide with CAVA. And then we also schedule our one-to-one sessions with students as needed or required. You could also do, say you have like 15 students in your class, you could provide a larger whole group instruction with everyone, which is kind of the lesson that I'm going to show you tonight. But then maybe you want for goal probing, for data, or maybe you see that a student needs to work a little bit more on a skill. You could schedule a smaller group, or like 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 with that student to kind of target those skills. And then my suggestion, just like what we do at my school, is if possible, I think it would be nice if you could pair your online lesson with packet work, or an online lesson that students can do independently or with a parent for review. So essentially, like the lesson that I'm going to show you tonight, you could basically turn that into a PDF and email that out to them, or if parents don't have access, to pull that up on their computer, maybe you can make packets and send it out. And so essentially they're getting kind of, what you're doing live, and then your parents are doing the repetition with them at home, doing the same work again. All right, so again, keep your schedule consistent from day to day. So it's kind of up to you if, in, excuse me, the time that you see your students, if you want to cover several different subjects, or maybe you just want to cover one subject a day and do a little bit of functional life skills each day. That's up to you, but whatever schedule that you do create, I would keep it consistent from day to day. That way your students know what to expect when they log in. Let's say on Monday, I know that I'm doing reading. On Tuesday, I know that I'm doing writing. On Wednesday and Thursday, I know I'm going to be doing math. Friday's fun day, something like that. And also the format or templates of your slides, I would keep that similar each day too. And just by doing that, and I'll show you the templates here, and you'll get a copy of them if you want to use them or just have some ideas. But by doing this, it's going to allow more processing time for your students to learn the virtual environment, as well as how to use all of the tools and how to participate virtually. So if they don't have to, put too much processing time into like, okay, what does this slide mean? Because they've seen the same kind of slide over and over every day. Now they can get more involved in the virtual component of online learning. And so what you would do with your templates is, you keep your template the same, but you switch the content out. And then it's also beneficial for you as the teacher because it does shorten the amount of time that it requires for you to create new lessons. So like I said, if you keep your format and templates very similar, you could just quickly copy and paste new materials in there. And then we're going to take a look at classroom expectations on this next slide. So here's a sample of just, you can create a class expectations slide and you can go over that with your students. Just kind of go over your basics. So these are things that I always expect my students to do. They're going to make sure that their equipment works before they log in, their microphone, their video. This is a little bit more pertinent to the Blackboard system that we use. You want to encourage your students to log in a few minutes early because if they do log in at, say your class starts at 9 and they log in at 9, they might not actually get into your class until 5 or 10 minutes after it started. So we always encourage our students to show up a little bit early. And then I really have no problems actually with my students participating. I think going into it was just always an expectation that I had of my students. And so they are very willing to use the mic, the chat, even the video because they love to see themselves on the screen or hear themselves, and they also love to see their classmates. And then always make sure, your students obviously are respectful towards one another. Again, chat box rules. Here, the use of bad language, or maybe, it starts to get like a little rowdy in your class, let's say. You as the moderator can always give your students privileges or you can take them away. So if a student is kind of like hogging the microphone or maybe they're not saying something really nice, everyone else can still have the microphone, but you can select that that student doesn't have it. Or maybe, if it's not quiet enough in the background, then, maybe people with Zoom, if the microphones are on, if someone makes a noise, then their picture might come up. So you might want to set the privileges so that, no one has the microphone available and then they can raise their hand and then you can give them the microphone privilege. And then here, breakout rooms. So my suggestion, if you're not familiar yet or really comfortable with teaching online, I would kind of hold off on the breakout rooms. It kind of makes things a little bit complicated. So my suggestion would be that you first try just doing a lesson whole group and scaffold within your lesson that way for your students' needs. And then as you get better, then start breakout rooms, because the really nice thing about breakout rooms is that's where you can get even more individual feedback on progress. You could even put different assignments that they need based on their levels there, but you have to jump in and out of breakout rooms and monitor those. So it just adds kind of another level of complexity. So I'll show you how you can scaffold work in just a minute.
So I think we have a few questions, and I know you were going to go through your lesson with your students, so maybe people can wait. But Erin does does work with students in the Mod Severe program, so I did just want to clarify that for people. So I'm going to let you continue, and then I think maybe in about 5 minutes we can answer some questions.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it is possible, but like I said, with our Mod Severe population, you really do need to kind of just do the same format day in and day out, so that way they get used to this type of learning and can get comfortable with all of the tools. And obviously with the school that I work for, we're kind of at an advantage because we most of my students, you know, they're all supposed to have a learning coach next to them helping them. Now, I can tell you that they probably all don't. And so those students, it just takes a little bit longer. I might have to like screen share to show them how to access a whiteboard tool or something. So you're just gonna have patience with your students. All right, so my classroom model, let's say my 2 hours, you know, I would start my students off with a welcome slide until everybody is logged in. Then we might review our daily schedule and goals and standards for the day. Then we can do some warm-up activities like calendar, weather, time, and money. We do a reading lesson, a quick writing lesson, and math. And so each of these, like core ones right here, they might take like 20 minutes. So obviously you're gonna schedule in transition breaks, some transition time and breaks for your students. So that's a good time to encourage your students to maybe stretch, walk around, use the restroom, get a snack. If you're super adventurous, then you know maybe you could do like go noodle with them or do like a yoga session. So this is a sample welcome slide, super basic. Some teachers, they like to put up the live cam of say like the Monterey Bay Aquarium or the San Diego Zoo on a specific animal. So you could even have that kind of playing as your students are logging into class. I usually have a little timer that's set up, you know, that'll show that class starts in 5 minutes. So they log in and this is kind of what they see until the timer goes off. Next, we'll look at the daily schedule. So this one's pretty simple. So I actually have a co-teacher, so we share. So I only teach the ELA component this year. Last year I did teach all of the subjects by myself, but this year I just teach reading and writing and vocabulary. So, you know, maybe you have a basic slide that just has the calendar up. You could go over the calendar. I just list my goals. I tell my students, okay, today we're gonna do an editing activity. We're going to do a chapter 2 recall and main idea activity today, and we'll also do our vocabulary review. And then our school, we like to put up the standards that the lesson is tied to, and we put it in an I can statement. And so I'll go over that with the students as well. And then this slide here actually is a really great way to get your students to participate. So my students, they all know that they're expected to use the chat box. We don't use the polling tools so much. I think that's a little kind of complicated for our students to use. But the chat box, everyone knows that they use that. And this is kind of like a contract. So they'll sign up saying, okay, well today maybe I'll use the microphone, or maybe I'm going to use the whiteboard. Or they sign up for both, which I give a ton of praise to students that are willing to use the microphone and the whiteboard. So they'll type or they'll write their names here. And honestly, if you use the participation contract with them, they really do participate a lot. So I highly recommend a participation contract before you get started on your lesson. All right, and now we'll take a look at just some ideas for warm-up activities. And so here would be the transition slide. You know, you'd say, okay, now let's take a look at our warm-ups for today. This can be like your calendar activity. You have your little calendar helpers. So you would call on volunteers and you'd say, okay, who would like to help fill out the calendar for today? You get some volunteers, you just type their name up here where it says student name, and then they work on the activity. And so, you know, one person's gonna grab the whiteboard tool and they'll circle the 8. And then maybe someone else, here I have to find my annotate. They are going to put a star next to the day of the week. And then maybe someone puts a check mark next to, you know, I don't know what that says there, put a star to the day, you know, next week, or tomorrow, sorry. And what's kind of nice is you can get like 3 students working all at the same time on a different skill. And then you could do like a peer review. So then you turn around and you ask for 3 more volunteers, or maybe even just one more volunteer, someone who's willing to check the students' work and use the microphone. And so that's a way that you can get quite a few students doing the same activity. And then here is, let me clear those drawings. Here's another way. This calendar activity is actually really cool because you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students working simultaneously on the activity. And then you can have like a peer review. So say if you have like 14 or 15 students in your session, you can assign, one group of students to do the whiteboard tools, and another group to kind of check the work and say, oh, I think that this is correct, or no, I don't think that it's Tuesday, it looks like it's actually Wednesday, something like that. Here's an example of how you could do a weather activity. So again, you really just have to be super creative on different ways that you can get as many students as possible involved in an activity. So the students, they love to see their names on the whiteboard. So as they see their names put up on the whiteboard, I would expect that you're going to get more and more and more volunteers, especially as they get used to their tools. Here's kind of like a telling time. So again, this is scaffold a little bit, and this one would be, a harder activity because they actually have to draw the hands on the clock, where this one, someone would just type the time in, and then over here, someone has to match, say, like the analog to the digital. And then maybe this is like a money activity. So again, you can have 3 students working all at the same time. You would just maybe type their name up here at the top, or if you're going to do the number 1, number 2, or number 3, as students kind of get used to this. And again, you can scaffold it depending on what skill maybe your student is working on. So with Zoom, you can't really do movables. If you have Blackboard, the really cool thing is you can upload your PowerPoint presentation and without the money on it. But then if you have the money saved, say like on another slide or Word document, you could copy and paste it once your slide is loaded and then paste it onto the actual Blackboard slide. And students can like grab the money and move it around. But I don't think that that's an option in Zoom. So they would have to like circle or put a little check mark or something.
So, yes, so let me address that real quickly, Erin. I think it's really important, especially because I'm getting a lot of questions about more like students who might fall in what we call more of a severe category. I think it's important that the district work with you to provide some technology that might be useful for your students. I don't think that, I don't even think that teachers should have to be using Zoom for free, but it might be that as a team, and we're going to hear on Friday from some teachers who teach adult transition and Mod Severe at the high school, how they're transitioning to distance learning. But like right now, it might be that you're just communicating with parents to even assess the situation of what is feasible, especially since some of you in the our attendees here have students who are like nonverbal. We also have some teachers in here who are asking about students who are very limited physically. So I hope that they would have access to their technology at home, and then it might be that you guys write an addendum or get some additional assistive technology at home for them to work with. And I would just suggest making videos for parents, training videos. You can do things like I make comic strip how-tos all the time, so you can cut and paste pictures, and that might be some of the work that you're doing. You're probably going to be doing a lot of training with parents right now. If you're not able to do live instruction, I think it's more important that you just figure out what is feasible for each student and work on maybe your department works together to get some training done of parents for some of these different activities. But that might be all that you're doing. So hopefully I was able to kind of address that, because I think we're getting a lot of questions about that. So okay. Yeah, and if you, I can't answer raised hands, so if you can please just put your question in the Q&A. We have about, I think, 10 questions open right now. So we will answer a little bit more questions. And then just give me more specifics, because sometimes I come from the mild moderate world, so sometimes we need a little bit more specifics about students before we can answer them. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was looking too in the Q&A here. So I actually, you would be surprised. So a lot of people are saying like maybe this is not geared towards Mod Severe. So when I first took my job with Kava, I thought, this seems really impossible. I don't know how this is going to work. But you'll be pleasantly surprised, I think, for the majority of your students. Now, I can say, there are going to be some students that might be really limited difficult for them. And so maybe just listening and watching you or their peers is a benefit. And then, like I said, pairing the online activity with the packet work or something that parents can do with them at home in addition so that they can get the hands-on experience would be beneficial. But like my nonverbal students, you have to just be really creative. So I actually have some nonverbal students, but they have communication devices. And so if they have one that can speak for them, you can always hand them the microphone and they can use their communication device to speak for them through the microphone. If they use a picture exchange system, then they can maybe point to the picture or they could pull the PEC off of their board and show that to the class if it's like a money. I also saw a question about what curriculum do we use. So all of the slides that I'm showing you tonight, I actually just made myself from pulling things from free resources off the internet. I didn't want to use resources that were paid for because I don't know what everybody has access to. I know my school, we use the unique learning system so that if you have access to that, you can screen share that with your students. At the very end of the presentation, I did make a slide and it's in that handout that Karen gave to all of you, a bunch of free resources. And there are a lot of online programs right now too that are normally you have to pay for them that they're offering for free right now as well. So I would definitely utilize all of that. So this is very doable. You will have to have parents, I think, involved though to kind of get it off the ground. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, and in terms of like working on goals, I mean, it might be you're just working on one goal. I would try to focus. You really know your students, especially some of you might have had them for like multiple years. I'm just thinking about what grade level you teach, but I would just focus on skills that might be the least frustrating for them as well, because I know some students might totally shut down. So your students, think about what they enjoy. You might have to do a little bit more individualized work with some of this. And if some kids, unfortunately, we're going to have some gaps for everybody because of this year. So we have to be able to let that go, I think, too, and know it's okay. And just you're all doing the best that you can. And none of us have all the answers. So this is a completely unprecedented situation.
Yeah, and I would say like for IEPs, things like that, I don't know, Karen, tell me if this is bad advice, but also, sometimes like no data is data. So if you have a student that isn't showing up or, you can't get a hold of parent, they're not participating, that sort of thing, you can always document that, in my opinion, also in the IEP and just use what you have.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's flexibility right now. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
We know you're all doing the best you can. Just take a moment to pause and breathe. I think I said that in the chat, but there's no way we can work effectively in crisis mode. So I think it's better to kind of like just take as much time as we need and just do the best we can. And working together might be helpful, like to help problem solve things. But the CDE does have a work group that I'm a part of, and we are working on resources. Mod Severe is one of our groups. So the next couple Thursdays, there will be some webinars through them, and we're also working on putting out resources that'll help teachers. So just stay tuned, and through CTA, we'll put those out to you all.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a question in here too. So they're asking how to get parents involved if their districts have said, that they can't really make them do any of the work. So we just highly encourage our families to be as involved as possible, have our students be as involved as possible, sorry. And, you know, that's really all that you can do. You know, you might have families where both of the parents are still working. Maybe they're both working outside of the home still, or maybe you have families that, you know, they don't have access to a computer or to internet, and, you know, they don't have a hotspot or something available. So I think right now everyone's just doing the best that they can. And so, like I said, if, you know, you can't get in touch with them, if you're also pairing the slides that you create for your online lesson, and convert that into a packet, you know, you can, I think, feel that you are giving them as much opportunity as you can, because you're providing the online learning as well as packet work, hopefully, that they can do at home as well. So I want to take a look. Here's a reading lesson. So again, here would be a transition slide to get your students ready. So this is also just something that I pulled off of the internet. If you have the snipping tool, that could be like your best friend, because you could just download PDFs of things and then you can kind of like snip little pictures here and there. This goes to a full activity, but you know, maybe you're going to do a reading prediction. Again, you can have students. I like having the grid here. And so I encourage students, hey, try to type on the whiteboard or write something on the whiteboard. What do you think, you know, this story is going to be about? And so maybe, I'm trying to get my annotate up, you know, they might write grass, or maybe they could type it, or maybe in the chat, they're typing what they think it is, or they raise their hand and they use the microphone and tell you what they think this story is going to be about. And then you can type the responses for them on the whiteboard. That way they can see that they are contributing to the lesson. Just because they can't maybe use that whiteboard tool, but they figured out some other way to communicate it, the students love to see their responses up on the board. And then here would be like the next part, you know, maybe it's you have someone who's reading, so you would type their name here if you have a reader. If you have someone that maybe is willing to highlight, you know, maybe they see some important words in there or words that they aren't familiar with, whatever, you know, you're working on with your group of students. And then usually for me with my, you know, most of my students, I'm going to have to take the notes for them the first time. And then we talk about too, like, okay, someone read it through the first time, we've highlighted it. We might talk about, you know, did we highlight too much of the page? Did we not highlight, you know, the big essential details? We take our notes, I'll type that for them over here, and then maybe as a class we try to come up with a good question that could go with the note. So you just have to get really creative. And usually I'll say the lessons that I do a lot of the ULS with them, the unique learning systems. And so we use like chapter books that we go through. And so we do a chapter a week. So we reread about 2 or 3 times before we kind of move on to like a writing activity. But I just wanted, for the sake of tonight and time, show you, you know, maybe you just do this on Monday, but on Tuesday you reread it again and just do the same lesson all over again, so that they're better prepared if you want to do a writing activity on this topic. You've already read it twice. And then same thing, here's like different comprehension questions. Again, if you were in Blackboard, you know, maybe you could grab this image and move it over, but you know, you could also have students, I got to find my annotate again. So the thing with Zoom to find your tools is you have to like hover, which drives me nuts. All right, so maybe you have one student that's able to, again, write the answer, but you know, maybe another student can like circle it and draw a line, or maybe they can't read it, but you have a picture of it here after you've read the question. There's lots of different ways that you can do comprehension checks. And also, you know, if you do a second reread, then maybe you would have your comprehension check just look a little bit different the second day. All right, oops. And then you could clear your slides too. So here, you know, here's some writing activities that we might do. There's like a transition slide to kind of get them ready for writing. You know, you could have multiple students again working on this. Maybe you type the student's name and you say, okay, Adam I want you to try to type a sentence that describes this picture. And then here, Stacy, I want you to type or write on that line. So you could have like multiple students working at the same time. And then, like I said, you could do your peer review and say, okay, let's take a look at Adam's sentence. What do we think? What could we add? Or maybe what doesn't make sense? So it's a lot of just guiding them through, but at the same time, you can also have multiple students working, and you could snip individual students' work and save it as for like progress reporting, or you could save everybody's work and kind of keep it for your data collection. I just want to share this with you because we actually had a lot of fun. This is a lesson that I came up with my students for St. Patrick's Day. So we did like a roll a story. So you can do like group writing activities too. It's fun because online there's a lot of virtual. So you can like find virtual dice and students could take turns rolling it. There's like spinner tools. So you could do like a spinning game as well, and students could take turns spinning to get a number. And then you could have like different stories set up. Maybe it's after you've read a story, and then you create your own stories set up that kind of ties into a story that you read. And then as a class on a blank screen, you can do like a writing activity together where they kind of dictate the story to you. And then here's math. Again, this is just a way to get like multiple students all involved at once. So I just did fractions here. You know, I know that this might not be pertinent to your students, but you could just, you know, plug this in and do whatever makes sense for your class. So again, you could have one student working on dividing the circle into 4 parts, another student is coloring in, another student is practicing writing it, and then all the other students could be working on the grid over here, putting their answer into a square. And then you go back and you do a peer review with everyone. And then the same thing here, you can assign, so depending on, you know, maybe your student has a goal just to identify the fraction, so you could type their name into the square that works for their goal. And then you could have multiple students working all at the same time. You know, or maybe here they're shading it in. Maybe you have a student who's adding together fractions, and then they could type or write in their response here. So hopefully that makes sense. You can have, you know, you can just set up your slides to have a lot of simultaneous workers. And then at the very end of class, what I like to do is have my students do their participation self-assessment. So that ties all the way back to that very first slide that says, how are you going to participate today? And then, you know, if they're able to do this activity, they can just type in the chat or, you know, tell you how they feel that they participated for that day. And a lot of times, too, the students, they're pretty honest, and they'll say, oh, I think I could have participated better, or I was excellent today. And that really does keep them engaged and thinking about, okay, tomorrow, how can I maybe participate even more? Or maybe how can I not be so shy and like use my microphone or my camera? And then here are the all the different resources. So this is included in what Kieran pushed out to all of you. Just some different free things. Some of them right now too are paid on here, but they're offering some free things right now during this pandemic. All right, so questions and answers, hopefully.
So I can start reading the Q&A. Someone asked, how do you do the unique books and lessons with the students? That was from Kimberly.
Okay, so with the ULS, you can screen share. So like if you're on Zoom and you're logged in, you can just screen share the stories with them. You could also, you know, maybe just snip it and put it in your PowerPoint for the students to be able to write on it a little bit easier. But anything that's screen shared, they can use the whiteboard tools.
How are the students annotating? From Celeste.
So yeah, that just totally depends on your students' unique abilities. So like I said, some students, they might be able to annotate using the pencil. So And it depends too on like what kind of computer they have. So I would think if they have a touch screen with like a little pencil, they could write directly on it, or you can use your mouse to annotate. You can type using the keyboard, and I know a lot of our students often have like a typing goal, so that's also kind of a way to tie that in. Students can also dictate to you, and you can type for them or write for them, or if they have a parent right there next to them, they can dictate to their parent, and their parent can type or write for them.
Yeah, there's even programs like Edu Creations where students can make their own videos, and there's some other Explain Everything is a good one. That's one you can use on the cell phone. I haven't used it. I'm actually going to use it for a training in a few weeks. Explain Everything. And then I posted one in here for older students, Cami, but that's a little bit more advanced. But okay, good question. How are the students interacting on the same screen? And I think you kind of explained that.
Yeah, so you would just have to make sure that everybody has permission, and so they would have permission to annotate, and then everyone can grab a pencil or the text to type, and you can have multiple people working all at the same time.
Padlet's also another good one, and it's pretty low tech, depending on if, I don't know what the level of your students are, but Padlet students can actually like upload photos. Can I just share that? Sorry, I'll just share real quickly.
Do I need to stop share?
Nope, I got it. I think because I'm the host. So Padlet, here we go. So Padlet's one that you can use, and it's pretty easy. Like students can click and upload photos, but also another one that I used with students who, oops, oh, you can't see it, but Comic Life from Plask is a great website, but I know you have to be able to download it, but students can actually make comic books, and I actually used this with students who were in middle school, but like at a first grade verbal level, and so they really weren't able to access vocabulary the same way, so I used this. I really think districts have to provide, districts have to provide more technology for our students with more moderate to severe needs, and they're just going to have to figure a way to get the assistive technology to them at home, because they have the greater need, and the district, maybe the program specialist, should be helping to train parents, not just putting it on you. So I think there needs to be a lot more coordination for our moderate to severe students so that they don't slip through the cracks, because that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. And at a certain point, we do have to let it go if parents, don't want to help us. But, program specialists should be working on some of these things, TOSAs. So we need to look for our resources in the districts to help all of you so that you're not alone having to do all of this.
Yeah, and then I see, is there a place to buy slides? So Karen gave you a PDF of these slides, and so you can just save them on your computer and save them as a PowerPoint, and then you can just use the templates that I've created and put your own stuff in there if you'd like. But it really, once you kind of get your templates going, it doesn't take too much time. And then, you always have to kind of observe and see, okay, what was successful in my lesson, what wasn't, how can I get students to participate more, were some students participating more than others? And you have to just really get kind of creative, and then over time you'll slowly tweak your lessons, and it will eventually hopefully start to meet everybody's needs. But I would suggest initially just trying to do whole group until you get used to it.
Someone's asking about availability not being at the same time. Couldn't they do maybe a doodle poll with parents to at least try to meet the needs of the majority of the group and then record it so that other students can access it later?
Yeah, so we record all of our sessions as well. So that way if a student does miss it, they can always go back. That's not going to be, I think, as good as live teaching, but yeah, you can record your sessions and send those out. And I would, I don't know what your district is having you do for your live instruction, how many minutes or hours you're required to do. So you could also always hold a couple of different sessions or do some smaller group sessions as well to try to just catch up with those students that aren't able to come.
And let's see, what time is it? It is 5:02. So if you still have a question or we didn't answer your question, please email me at ipd@cta.org. So I'm just going to put that in here, ipd@cta.org. So I just want to cover a few things before we let you go. I'm sorry we couldn't answer everyone's questions, but I really appreciate the fact that you guys all came. I know you've all been working and dealing with others, family things and everything else. So thank you for being here. So ipd@cta.org, if you still have questions or are looking for some specific resources, we will try to help you the best we can. Also, you will get an email tomorrow from Zoom. That'll be a follow-up email. And in that email, there will be a link for a form to fill out in case you want a certificate of completion. So we've had so many requests for those. We just have a form now that goes into a spreadsheet. And then we have a repeat of this session again at 5:15 today. So if you'd like to join us back, you can. The registration's up on our website. Tomorrow we are doing virtual teaching part 2, and Friday we're addressing moderate severe students, actual brick and mortar program that's moving to distance learning. The teachers wanted me to tell you they don't have all the answers, but they're kind of they're all in the same boat as you, and so they're figuring things out. And we're going to hear from them to see what they're doing, what's working, what's not working, and that's at 4 o'clock. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Erin, for presenting, and we will see you all later, and be safe out there. Yes, the slide deck will be posted on our Google Drive. So I will just quickly share this. Good question. So cta.org. If you go to our website right here, it says IPD webinar handouts. You can click on that and it'll bring up the folder. And then I labeled it with today's date, and it's teaching special education virtually. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.